All right, how's everyone doing? This is Mr. Anderson. Just wanted to do a quick market update video. Basically, going into some different details here in reference to what we've been looking at with this market. We see that we have, well, you know what, let me just explain. Obviously, I mapped out some support and resistance, but I can show it to you. I figure if I just map them all out while you're here, it's going to be a real pain to go ahead and do it all with you. So what we'll do is we'll just map out a few areas. These are weekly. This was our weekly. We see here that it was rejected. It also was rejected on the bullish side, right? So we had a bearish rejection, which it came back, another bearish rejection, finally broke into this area, and then had a bearish rejection here on the top side, broke through as well. So this was a resistance area that flipped to support, that then acted again at, flipped to support, held as support, and went. So then we had this area with a giant zone, and we can see that that's where we stopped out. And of course, that also coincided with the 200-week moving average right there. Okay. Then I'll take that off for now. What we also see is I have this area here, which is an area that in the past we came back and tested, right? Once, twice, 3 weeks, 4 weeks that it held and took off, came back, actually did hold on this downside for almost the better part of 3 weeks, but 2 weeks for sure, rejection, and then finally it caved, right? So that's what occurred on the weekly scale. And then we see that we only lost it for a week or so, and they kind of went back through, but still that holds, so now that's there. Up here, weekly scale. The weekly scales aren't marked. I don't want to mark everything and have a bunch of writing on, but we had this long one, obviously we're well aware of this. This was the big one that was there forever. That was that hindsight line that we talked about many months before it broke down. We said, hey, you know what, this is going to be our hindsight line, the one we never want to break, and of course we did break it. You know what happened. First week, had a little bit of a rejection. There was some hope. Could it build? Is there any chance? And then of course it did not. In fact, I'm drawing this out. This is a very weak one. It was, put it this way, it was a weak support. It certainly is a resistance. It's just that ultimately, as a support, this was literally a Sunday night and it burst on through within hours of opening that week. But still, we're going to draw it out appropriately. So you guys know what it was on the daily scale. I'm just kind of giving you a quick rundown just so you know that we didn't make these up out of thin air. What do we do on the daily? Just looking for staying local, right? Here's where we're at. All right, let's see. Rejection in terms of a bullish rejection. So bullish rejection, held 4 days, broke through. Bearish rejection, 1, 2. Jumped back in with a big candle. Couldn't break to the upside, right? Lost momentum. What did we see? Let's hold in this area again. Lost it, okay? So this is a daily zone, okay? Another daily zone here. I know it's confusing because we're overlaying time frames, so that can happen. Of course, you can change colors if you want. I never do. I don't mind doing it if you guys really want me to. So if you guys want to let me know about that, feel free. I would try to get in the habit of not, because it take a long time to set them up. But if you like it that way and you got a system, do it. If you want to develop one, do that as well. You might say, hey, you know what? My resistance are red. My supports are blue, my dailies are green, my weeklies are red. Again, it's whatever you want ultimately. But what I'll do is occasionally, I might mark one, hey, weekly. In all honesty, when I'm doing this for myself, I don't really mark any of these local areas because I see them, right? I do mark the ones that are in the past because you got to zoom out, you got to look at market structure. So something like weekly, normally what I would have is I would have the weeklies marked, and I wouldn't even have anything else up there. But the difference is we're trying to teach it and learn it. So we have to show them, of course, right? So instead of saying, yeah, this is obvious, it's not obvious right now, so let's deal with it. Okay, so that's where that came from. Now let's zoom in closer. Daily. Let me give you some more insight in terms of why I have this marked off. This is a big daily. Why did I make it so big, right? Well, really, it was just this one to begin with because it rejected. Right here, these areas. So I could have had this drawn out kind of like that, right? But since we lost it, I just basically enclosed the whole thing. It's almost like a weekly within it, But we're going to give that whole zone because instead of giving two zones very close to each other, we'll mark it as one whole. And then we'll give the credence to the lower time frame down here on H4. And those I did try to mark. It's just when I zoom in and out, of course it's going to mess you up. But I want to show this to you. I'll zoom in. How do we come up with these? Well, look at the local bottom. We had an issue here where price was going down. You know, ideally if you can find these areas where things stopped out and you had that fight, then that could be a nice zone, an area of interest, right? An order block, right? So here we go. We got this basically a situation where you had this big zone. Now you can label the whole thing. I just try to condense them a little bit. Sometimes you condense them if you have a really nice fighting candle here where the body is nice. You can do the candle. Sometimes you can bring it down. A lot of this is art, not science, right? So it's up to you and see, you know, what do I see? What makes me feel more comfortable, etc. Because again, we're just trying to build walls. We don't know if they're paper mache walls, if they're ironclad walls, or just zones at the moment. But what we saw is that we did break it, but we had the backdrop here of the higher scale support, which it bounced off, so it went right back through. So how strong this one on 4 hour, we don't know, but we know that it's the local bottom. We know that it retested, right, and then took off, so we do map out that area so that we know that could be a catch zone within the larger scale catch zone, so we could shrink it a little bit. And then we know that we had that big candle theory that passed right on through this zone. Remember, it fought hard for this zone. I'll zoom in again. I'm ending up spending all the time, so I might as well map that out in front of you. But regardless, rejection, 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 right? That's what makes support. Rejections. Rejection, rejection, rejection. Rejection, 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 rejection. This is the only reason why some people said, hey, maybe this has a chance. Look at all these rejections. But then ultimately it said, nope, we're taking it out. At that time, this would have been resistance until it was flipped. And you might have known I put out some tweets and said, all right, now this is our first layer of support, right? This is where the bulls are going to regroup. And then ultimately came up to what was a previous resistance, right? Why? Because it resisted here. You can see even in the past, it resisted there. This is the stuff that should really interest you, right? It's very intriguing. Even I, you know, when you look at the market, TA has its flaws, right? Always. But one thing about the support and resistance that's always intriguing is that you can pull them back, right? So because reality is, to get this resistance, what we did is we had this breakthrough. Say, all right, before we had this breakthrough, I could have came here and said, look, the previous, it's pretty clear to see where resistance is, right? The previous run stopped here before rejecting. So because there was a rejection there, that is resistance. There was an order flow problem, right? There was more sellers than buyers at that point. So right there is a level of resistance because it could not break over that area the last time it was there. But what's intriguing is that you can always bring them back, and you'll see that far more often than not, that same zone will have significance all the way through, or at least a good ways through. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's look. Even though we just found this area here, right? Even though it had went through in the past here and there and cleared these areas, we could see that it had trouble. Right when it broke through, this became resistance. Right. At this time, it even tried to resist it going down. It tried to make a little stop here. You see that pivot right there, right? See the little color change. This would be, at the moment, I promise you, that hurt some people. When we were looking at it this way, like that, people said, oh, wait a second. Maybe we're building a higher low, higher high, higher low. This could be it. People were interested here. And then it took them out. The bears came in and squashed them. So it's always interesting. Then you go back further and you see rejection, 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 rejection. And when you do that, that can give you a little bit more confidence. Hey, did I choose the right area? Okay. Anyway, ended up breaking on through again. And when that happens, remember, you got the bottom side rejections as somewhat of a support area. And then the same thing once it passes through that top side, that, hey, it had some trouble here, but then it went through. It's a new support, right? So it doesn't hold all the water in the world, but you can see, again, same thing. We pull it back, and what happened? Hey, it resisted there before, it resisted there before. And it's not like you can pick any spot on the chart and that happens. It's not the case. So you can see that, hey, those areas, they do matter, right? Okay, so that's how we got that. Just wanted to give you a little insight. Where are we? Ultimately, we see our longer terms. We ran up into this zone. You know, I drew this line. It wasn't there before. We drew the line once we pivoted into this area. I think I probably drew it on a daily scale. Let me see. If you're wondering why it looks like that, nope. I don't know what scale I drew it on. So let's redraw. Let's do it on a 4-hour. Okay, 4-hour. I'll go candle body. You can pick the tops if you want. I'll go candle body to candle body as an example. What does that mean? That means I'm taking the top, the highest closing high right there before it was rejected, to the highest closing high right there. And then we're building a little bit of a trend line, which we haven't got too deep into it, but I don't put all the weight in the world into trend lines. You know, they're basically similar to these support and resistance zones, but even weaker, right? Sometimes they mean something for a while and then they just give way. Sometimes you can retest them a little bit, but they're not anywhere near as good as the horizontals are. And even the horizontals have their problems, as we talked about. Sometimes they're paper mache walls and sometimes they're ironclad. We just have to figure that out. So here we are. Ran into some trouble, but hey, what a run, right? We knew it was a run back then. We talked, we said, hey, this was the area right there where support was. We talked about it then. This was our support zone right there. And of course it came on down right there. We had a little bit of run back and right into that line that we would have drew earlier and tested that area before dumping recently. So the question is, where are we going? We're going up or down. Oh, wow, great job, Mr. Anderson. Well, hey, sometimes that's the market. Sometimes it's up or down. You know, we don't know. The idea is that, look, a clear area, the stronger plays, always the higher time frame plays are the better ones, right? Because you can pick a spot, a high time frame. And so if you said, look, I'm going to buy, on a test of this 200 as a test of weekly support here, and if it holds, great, I got a nice move. Now, you might not have known it was going to be this nice, but the idea was that would be a play, and you're in a better position. I'm going to explain this in detail. I'm going to get rid of all of this, okay? For now, I'm going to hide it. If you guys ever want to do that because you have too much here, this right here, it will hide. So you hide all your drawing tools, okay? So I do want to get back some moving averages right there. If you don't know about moving averages, we will teach them, don't worry. But I'm going to run through as if you do know. If you don't worry, it's not the end of the world. But the idea is this. That's the higher probability trade, is these higher time frame trades played, right? So we had this one right here. We had this. We know this was known resistance. So this isn't doing things in hindsight. We talked about this. We put out tweets, right? So we knew, like, hey, this was an area that could hold. It ended up holding, and if you got in at that point, that run up right there got you in a good position. Why? Because you had a beautiful pop, and now these moving averages were chasing. You see that? Moving averages were chasing. Same thing here. Same thing up here. And then finally start to get some breakdown on lower time frames, and then eventually on this 4-hour too. But it still had one more last gasp in it, which they usually do. And then, of course, the same scenario started to happen. And since then, what you really have is chop. Now I'm going to bring this back again. Because look, you said you got this chop, but what's really happening? Now it's bouncing back and forth, and it's being pulled back and forth. So why can't we say, hey, this is a great play now? We knew that this was a solid play, and we could have determined that, hey, this was a solid play down if we wanted, or at least to get out and take some profits in these regions, or maybe even here. Maybe you waited until you came back and started to test your moving averages. That's fine. But ultimately, what would make, you could have had a nice play here as well, because now it got back to our main support, right? Our first support, we said, hey, this is where, remember, during the run-up, we could go back. I don't want to bring up the tweets right now, but we talked about it and said, hey, this is where they're going to try to make a higher high, right, on the 4-hour. So I'm going to explain to you what's a little different. Why can't we say right now, hey, well, same thing, same scenario, this should be a great play? It might be. It might be. But the reason why now it's more difficult is this. In the beginning, we had a situation where we had moving average chasing. In this situation, we were trying to pick an area of resistance, and we started to see some slowing down. We started to see some RSI flips. We started to see some bearish divergence. So there were some reasons why you either would have exited or maybe even entered a short if you chose to do so. If you're looking for shorts, which makes sense, it is a bear market. Maybe you're looking for shorts. But ultimately, now that we're here, and we won't even get too much into this of what happened. This happened overnight for me. I had a feeling before going to bed that, maybe this is going to dump. But I didn't play it. I was not involved in this dump, so I can't say that I was or claim that I was. I was involved in this long. I was involved in getting out here. But on this particular play, I was not involved. I was involved here during this run-up, and in all honesty, while this thing popped, it reversed so quickly that I sold at a very small gain. That's an ugly candle. But it didn't immediately start to reject it. At this time, I'm thinking, all right, we're going to be bearish, We started to fight back. So by the time we got into this area, not this candle, actually I think it was right around that candle here, I was going to bed. Late at night for me where it was, I'm thinking, should I get short? But these things are happening on lower time frames, and I'm going to get into that in a minute, and that's one of the problems. Now, I am going to show you, though, how can we try to utilize some of the tools that we do have, right? Because I don't want to confuse the life out of you. But first, I'm going to explain why this is a little bit different than this. Because you're saying, hey, Mr. Anderson, this was a great area because it was entering our H4 support. I'm going to get rid of this box. I'm going to get rid of some of these boxes for sure. Even the daily. Just because there's too much up here, right? What did I do? This one. I keep pushing the wrong button. I apologize. Right there. We can get rid of the weekly for now. We know where that's at, right? Okay. So, one of the problems we have, and it might not be a problem because it's still an area you see the support, even though you did a little middle of the night type dump that led into the morning, a little panic. It is trying to hold. So will it back build? We'll see. But the problem that you have is this. Just like this scenario, once this dumped, the chase was on again, and you end up working your way back into these moving averages, and then losing it, working your way back into these moving averages, and then finally breaking through. So the difference is this was the first test. The bulls could have felt pretty good. You could have found some reasons to get in terms of market structure on lower time frame, because on a 1 hour, it looked a little bit different, which I'll explain. So now on a 1 hour, what happened? We started to regain some moving averages again. If you haven't gotten to moving average much, don't worry. But what started to happen is you started to at least build on some of this. And I mean, now actually that I look at it again, that's right. All these things were happening on such low time frames. I'm going to have to look down, and I can see the pullback was sufficient enough to where I could see some people that got spooked there. Let me see. So I don't want it to just give you misinformation. Okay. So this one didn't do so terrible. So ultimately, you started to get a situation where you were starting to build. You see higher low, higher high, higher low. So there is still a reason why you would have been involved in that, and ultimately it was your first layer of support. Go forward on this lower time frame. I'm jumping around a bit, and that's kind of part of these market updates. Are going to be a lot of jumping around. It's just kind of a natural part of the equation as we roll through it. And when I say everything's happening on a low time frame, let's look at this. This is insane, right? This is one part I don't like about what's going on in here, and I'll give you a little insight as to why it is going on. You see I deleted some support and resistance, right? So support and resistance was up here, down here, higher time frame, lower time frame. So what's happening? It's being sucked around, right? Boom, 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 boom. And that's fine for some range trading, but not what we've seen is the guys that are the price action range traders, they've been getting crushed too, right? They've been, hey, it's going down. No, it's not. They got chopped out. Okay, close. So, and these guys are good at what they do, and still it's just a lot of choppiness because of the multiple areas of support and resistance that we're seeing. So the problem I have is this, man. 15 minutes. This is a 15-minute candle. So this 90% of this move, this leg, happened in 15 minutes. Right? I know you might say, well, that's Bitcoin. It doesn't have to be how Bitcoin is. Right? It's not supposed to be that way, that the majority of your move is coming in one 15-minute bar. And the reality is 95% of it is happening within a 30-minute time frame. And you see this one and this one. And then, of course, you start to go sideways a little bit, and then the same exact thing. And this one, just one candle, 15 minutes, one dump. One giant red volume candle right there, down volume, and it's not something that's appetizing, because if you are going to play it, you have to be watching this thing. Now, when this happened, I woke up in the morning. The one thing that does bother me is when something happens that I would consider unnatural. Meaning, I do study trends, and we're starting to get into some advanced things when we talk about that. So I'm not going to get into that right now. But the way I study trends, I'll look for the way the trends were going. I can't stand to see something that is considered uptrending and then boom, a major reversal. Now, the truth be told, that doesn't happen a lot. The time frames were lining up so that this was actually sort of predictable if you were watching. You could have predicted it. Now, for me, it was in the middle of the night, and you would have literally been having to be watching this thing on the lowest time frame to even make sure that was occurring. But you could see that the momentum built up, and then there was just a dump, and that's kind of how it happened. So from that standpoint, I'm okay with it. Part of the big problem of why this even occurred is that you ended up having this Sunday rally. Weekend rallies, big shot-ups like that, they're so unlikely to hold. Who's trading? There's not a lot of rich guys trading on a Sunday that are sitting there saying, hey, let's pump this thing up. It doesn't make a lot of sense. All the Wall Street guys are certainly not trading on a Sunday. So I never like to see that anyway. So that kind of played a factor as well. But the idea is that these low time frame things, if you're watching and you're playing actively, hey, it can work out. It's difficult, though. I said I'm okay with how it transpired because I can tell you that, in fairness, the trends started to point down in this area all at once, and it kind of just avalanched very quickly. But from market structure perspective, yes, technically, look, you were higher high, went lower low, so low, and then lower low. So you had a lower high. It's going to be higher low, lower low from here, lower high, right? Now this one was starting to make a little bit of a triangle, and then it kind of broke down from there. So you could justify it, but it was tricky, even watching the market structure. So I don't like that. Finally, now you start to build back through some of these moving averages on a very low time frame, and then again, you get another one of these pumps, and then that pump isn't looking too hot. You don't like to see them just immediately reject to that kind of extreme. And usually these rejections have been, people trying to get out. So, again, where do we go? It's the weekend. I won't be paying that much attention. I don't like to pay attention to these things on the weekend. But as I mentioned, I do want to point out what the options are and how we can kind of decipher some of this. Now, the problem is, as you know, obviously you can use your system where you use signals from you can use signals from the system itself and go about it that way. But of course, we're also trying to teach how to not utilize those signals so that you would have a game plan in place for something like that. Well, one of the problems that you end up having, I'm going to hide this again, is the time frame, as I mentioned. And it's not easy to determine time frames. Part of what you can do is see how long the big moves are occurring. Now, it was a little bit better on this rise, but then we started to get in an area where they're literally 15-minute candles. So if they're 15-minute candles, you would literally have to look at a trade signal on like a 1-hour basis, which is going to give you, buy, sell, like that. So you're going to be all over the place getting chopped up as well, because you're going to take your 1 hour down to a 15-minute for the actual trade. So yeah, perhaps you got a sell signal here. I don't even know. I don't have it up, but maybe that's the one way it could have worked. But without that, you're in a difficult situation because it's very tricky again. So when I'm saying this, it's not a cop-out or anything along those lines. I'm letting you know why trading gets difficult, because it's very important from a trading psychology point of view to understand, like, hey, these things happen for a reason. It's because they're trying to chop you up. They want you. They want the bear's money, and they want the bull's money. It's probably that HFT, high frequency type trading, where they're saying, all right, well, let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and get the bear's money, and let's go ahead and get the bull's money real quick. It's that kind of scenario. But do you want to be actively trading on that type of level? I don't know. If you do, and that's your appetite, great. Enjoy it. Go to those low time frames and have type stops, and you can do it that way. My point of bringing that up is that right this second, down here, yeah, a daily scale signal, bringing it to a 4-hour would have worked out very well. But if you're trying to trade here and within this chop and taking daily signals, those daily signals, it's not their fault, right? Because, and I don't even care if, I'm not talking about the indicator itself. I don't care about that being right or wrong as far as, because I created it. That's not what I mean. I'm just saying we have to keep perspective of time frames, right? Ultimately, from a time frame perspective, we have to say, all right, once we're in a drawdown, a higher time frame move would come from a pivot point, right? Pivot point, pivot point. Is this going to be a pivot point? It's possible, right? But how likely? Is this a pivot point? Well, no, it cannot be. Why? Because if anything, the pivot point would have been there. I want you to think this through for a second. Hear what I just said. This couldn't be a pivot point. It would have to be here. So could you take a daily time frame signal and then transfer it to a 4-hour, Heikin Ashi type system? No, you wouldn't want to do that because your pivot was there, right? There and then there. If this is what's called an inside candle on some type of scale. Let's go to a weekly scale. Right? I want you guys to get this concept a little bit. It's a little bit of a different market update. But see what I see? See right there? That big old weekly right there? So these are inside bars, right? They're happening within this candle. I hope that resonates with you guys. But by the way, next week I want to do some live videos with you guys, some group sessions. And we can kind of get into this kind of topic a little bit. You guys probably will ask a bunch of questions, and those questions I'm going to say, oh, let's not get into that right now. But questions like this, I will want to get into, right? Because it's important to understand that, look, I don't want to look for a daily scale signal in this region because I'm on an inside bar. What we do is we'll count bars. I say we, like a pro. And when I'm counting candles, anything that's inside, I don't give it a new number. So if this is the one candle, this is the one candle also, and so is this, and so is this. And this one peaked out. So I might restart my count. Say, all right, so here we go. I got some more candles going. But here, all these were inside, right? So we had one. Right here, this is one. You might say, what are you talking about? Well, nothing happened. There was nothing going on, right? Now we're saying, oh God, it's been days. Okay, well that's us. We're impatient. But this was nothing except a triangle. So to me, this is all one pattern, one move, one day. And if the God says, hey, to me, a day is 1,000 years, 1,000 years is a day. Well, in trading, it's something similar. If you're inside a candle, it's all the same thing. You need to get outside your candle. Right? And now, okay, these things are something to pay attention to. But when you're inside your candle, so be it. So if I'm inside a larger scale candle, how do I know I am? Well, I have a structure like this where I just had a pivot to the downside, right? And in this case, I had it here and here. So I had this one and this one. So at the time, you might even have viewed it like this. And you don't have to be right on these things. It's just at that moment in time, we had something going on that was like that. So you have to be aware of these things that, hey, all right, sure, could it break out? It could, but I have a tightening. We call this a coil. You can call it a triangle, right? It's a coiling type of process where everything is getting condensed, whether you realize it or not, and compression, right? Compression, because you're compressing the price and compressing the range, creates expansion, which finally occurred. Okay? So that's why you can't look for a daily scale play, because it's not going to work out when you're compressing, right? You're not going to get a move that says little candle, little candle, little candle, little candle, little candle, right? That would be a nice daily type move, meaning taking a daily signal to 4 hours and you're getting 4-hour candles, a series of them like this. Let me go to the 4 hour. Where you're getting a series of candles, something like, even like that would be fine, right? And you might say, well, look, it did happen, you got a series. That's fine. I get what you're saying, but because it's being compressed, right? The reality is that move happened in a 15-minute candle or two. And then you had all of these 15-minute candles sideways, and then boom, again. So what might look like to the eye, like, hey, on a 4-hour basis, it was showing a move. No. Sure, if you happen to pick it. But the reality is this was a 15-minute time frame type of trade that grew into something larger. That's the reality of how this played out. So the only reason I went through all of that is to kind of hopefully give you a little lesson on time frames there. But what we did say is we want to try to give you something that you can use. Now, you guys are very aware of the fact that you have a tool that's called God's Eye. And maybe you use it, maybe you don't. I think most of you do not. And that's good. I haven't wanted you to use it, right? But there's something very advanced about God's Eye, and I want you to know about it. Okay, I'm gonna finish. I'm gonna wrap up this video pretty soon, but I do want you to know about good old God's Eye. You know, I don't want you to jump in and just start trading with it. God's Eye 2.0 is the one you want. That's the better one. And God's Eye is this very powerful tool. You might see all this. I mean, what is this? And it's kind of the reason why I say, hey, don't even use it, because in the beginning it's just going to confuse the life value, right? Let's take off strong buy. We don't need God's Eye for that. We can even take out potential buy and short. We don't need it for that either at this moment. What God's Eye does, and you've heard me say this again before, is it does an unbelievable job of measuring the momentum of a single candle. Whether that's a 4-hour, 8-hour, 15-minute, doesn't matter. It's going to give you a very good perspective of that candle. Now, what are the criteria? Well, you have sell, which would be the weakest, early sell, right? You have neutral, which you don't see. You have early buy, and then buy. So there's really 5 categories. We just don't want neutral because then something's going to be on every bar. The other thing you don't have, it doesn't go from sell to early sell because that doesn't really make a lot of sense, but that does occur. It would go sell, early sell before rolling over to neutral, and then, you know, this would be early buy before it was buy. So it probably started this bar being early buy, and then it got stronger and became a buy, right? But you can review, there was a video, of course, on God's Eye if you want to review some of that, but I'm going to kind of get into this a little bit for you because I do want to show you something. God's Eye, even on this scale, right? Now you'll shrink your time frame for trades, but the one good thing is let's just say you were up in this area and you said, you know what, I'm intrigued. I want to look for a buy in this area, which is fine. You might have some good reason. You like the consolidation. Hey, okay, this bursted up. It didn't give up even half the candle. That you could make sense of it. There was a flag. It kind of tried to break out of that flag. Yes, there was a rejection here, but you know what? I think they're trying to trap the bears, and it's going to go. Those all are great stories, right? Everything you said, honestly, I would agree with that it's a possibility. Let me get rid of this again. No, I didn't agree with it at the time, but the logic behind it isn't flawed. You know, someone can make sense of that. I assure you that in a bull market, this type of thing will happen all the time, and it will be bullish. But here's the beauty about God's Eye. It's not that it's always wonderful, right? But it's very rarely going to put you in a situation. Actually, it's just not going to put you in a situation, right? I shouldn't say not. Of course it could, right? Depending on the time frame. But as you can see in this situation, what were you getting? Early sell, sell. Only early buy, not buy. Early sell, sell. Early buy, sell. So what was happening? Every time an early buy came in, this time you had a nice push up. Maybe this even turned into a buy. Obviously got immediately rejected, so it disappeared to something like a neutral. Early sell, right? So the majority of what you're seeing is it's saying no. Bearish bars. Bearish, 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 bearish. On that 4-hour time frame. Let's go back here. Now right here, obviously we know in hindsight, it's easy to see these things in hindsight, right? But we can learn some lessons about them. In hindsight, we can say, look what we see here. This was our region that Mr. Anderson's trying to say, hey, we could have bought here, right? I mean, let's go back all the way. Let's do it from here in the beginning. I'm going to look at only the buys for now, and then we'll go back and look at the sells. Now, what do we see? Yes, right here there was a sell at the bottom. Very normal on a flip to go from a sell to a bullish engulfing type of buy. Now, this is an early buy, right? So if you didn't get it, that's okay. But this was right on that 200. We had to sell into it. The buyer said nope. They took it from there, right? You had a rejection here from resistance. So if you didn't get in, that's fine too. But then what happens? The buy signal, okay? Because it's saying that this candle, by the way, this is a beautiful candle. It wasn't a lot of volume. It was a Sunday night. I remember when that occurred, but beautiful candle. I mean, it literally took that candle to the roof. Very little wick at all, almost nothing. But then we had some chopping here, right? Well, guess what? Look what you don't see. You notice there's no sells or early sells? Bears got crushed here. How do I know it? Let's think, guys. Let's think here. And anytime you hear me say something like think, I'm never, ever, ever being offensive, okay? So please, I don't want anyone to think that, but I'm just saying, let's think it through, okay? So let's think this through. There's no early sell. There's no sell. No, there could be, and this could still happen. But the fact that there isn't actually tells us a lot here, right? It's telling us that despite the fact that we're getting rejections, the bulls are taking on all of this supply. This was a trap. The first bear trap. Okay? So they took on the supply here. They took it on to such a level that you got rejection on a 4-hour, a nice pullback, right? Look at that. Ugly candle. That's a pretty ugly candle. But no early sell. Huh. People were getting short. And those people were about to get roasted. And they got crushed right there. And this was a big one, right? It was a very big one. So here we are. We're in a situation now. You might say to yourself, well, how come it didn't pop back up? Well, we remained in buy. See this? Otherwise it would have. It didn't even go back to neutral. You guys understand? The worst thing that happened here, I'm trying to let you help, just so you know, because it's never going to go buy to early buy, because it doesn't make sense. It's not, we don't put neutrals up. I could, but you're going to have something on every bar, I promise you it's going to get annoying. But you can learn to identify this. And look, it's either buy or early buy, right? So at the moment, these are just all considered early buys. Buy, and they're either still considered a buy or an early buy. Why? How do I know that? Because it would have changed. It would have went to early sell, right? Or a neutral. So something like that happened. But I can already tell it didn't even go neutral. Why do I know that? Because one of these, this would have certainly been a buy or early buy. Certainly a buy. So it almost looks like it remained a buy. And I can go in to look at the algorithm and look. I have a physical way to look at it. But likely this thing remained a buy the entire time, which is amazing. Okay? So, what do we know? Came back, still held its way, probably made its way to neutral at worst, maybe early buy, and then again that buy signal. Everything was bullish, we already know that. Finally, an early sell. And let's talk about that. How perfect was that early sell? If you wanted to take some profits there, I mean, that got you in even before the sell. But then you start to see a little bit of a triangle form here. You guys will start to see things like this over time, just naturally. Think consolidation. When these things occur, you start to see something like that, and then it breaks out. Anytime that occurs, you're going to get a continuation, right? See that continuation of a move. If it breaks out to that side, you expect it to continue. So that's what occurred there. And you're in buy mode again. It's holding, even with these rejections, holding. Finally, early sell, right? Right there. So what's the point of what I'm bringing up here? Look how well God's Eye can help you in these situations. Okay? Now, we gave you the exit in terms of utilizing RSI. You can even utilize something like the MACD if you choose. And when I say RSI, I'm talking about the divergence indicator. But this is a very powerful momentum indicator to look at one candle. And that candle says early sell, and it usually leads to some type of trend, even if it's just a couple bars. And look what happened. Nice pullback. And then here, early buy. Now, it got a little choppy, because you got early buy, sell, and then back to buy. And it made its way up again. Now, this area is choppy, so it's not that it's wonderful or doing some amazing job. But when the market's choppy, how well is it going to do? Is it going to say, hey, we're about to be choppy? No, of course not. All it can do is give you a roadmap, right? And the roadmap said early buy, sell, buy, early sell, buy. I mean, the reality is it did a perfect job. This thing does very well. It's just the time frame is wrong. You understand? We're on the wrong time frame. So that's the issue. Now, it's not your fault. It's hard to trade like that. But ultimately, you can see what kind of map this draws. Okay? The key is, can you catch the time frame? If you can, great. If you cannot, well, you're going to have some trouble. But we're showing that this thing is painting a picture for you that's very helpful. Now, you don't have to play every one of these at all. I'm not suggesting that at all because, of course, we just talked about it. You're going to get chopped out. This one was not so good. Still, at worst, it was going sideways, right? This God's Eye. God's Eye's a trip, especially when you're getting some movement. Volatility, it's a good thing. In this case, early buy, led to a sell. You know, I'm almost mapping them all out at this point. Let's just go back up here to where we were. This one, trend line. Now, remember, drew a line. Do we know if that trend line is going to matter? Well, we did. We had 1 point. We touched it to the next. We dragged it out. Okay? So I know I got so much written here, and I apologize for that, but I'll try to zoom in to make you guys understand. So at this point in time, we had some support. So I draw a little line. I draw my trend line. Great. Here we go. Trend line. And I extend it out. Now let's just imagine that this is where we were at in life, right there. We extended out our trend line way out into the future where there was no data. Went over. Here we go. Coming back. Now we're testing. The trend line starts to hold. You get a buy signal there. So you might have said, all right, I trust my trend line because I got a buy on the trend line. Okay, somewhere on that. Maybe you got it here, there. Maybe you got it at the close. It's up to you. But the point is, now you could say, all right, maybe I feel more comfortable entering that position because I have the ability to say, hey, there was a trend line here. I have an indicator that says, hey, at the moment, this candle is showing a buy. And usually, from what we've seen, is there's some follow through in those situations. And you keep a tight stop in those situations just in case. You can get out and you can look for something like an early sell. You can look for something like a bearish candle. That's up to you. Now, in this case, you had a sell up here somewhere in this candle, so would have gotten you much? Maybe not. But guess what? You end up retesting right there your same trend line. And what happens? First, you don't succeed. Try again, right? You have a situation where you have that trend line that you drew, which by itself, I could care less. Piece of toilet paper, right? But in a situation to where I got a trend line and some momentum, now maybe you got in on that. Doji with a buy signal? What is happening, by the way? Let's talk about that. If you guys know Doji, great. If not, you can read about it, DOJI, or you can wait till we go into this, which we will. But Doji, which is supposed to be a little bit of an indecision candle, but yet it's showing buy momentum. That's telling you something, guys. Now, one, you could try to wait until you break out, but like we said, these moves are happening so quick. What are you going to do? But if you happen to get in, I'm not saying you should have, but if you happen to, you could see the indicator would have been very powerful, giving you that last big move. Great early sell, right? Now maybe you got in selling into this resistance as we talked about, right? I'm sure there was some divergence on the lower time frames, but ultimately the whole point is that these early sells and these sells are helping you out a lot. So before this dump happened, you did get a sell. Now if you were me, you're sleeping. But ultimately the idea is that you can use God's eye for this type of situation. Okay? This is what God's eye is best at. This is what you can utilize it for. Now, we're back into the situation to where we tested this area. You could say to me, all right, look, we're testing this again. Well, one thing I don't like is that, even though it was just a wick, I don't like that the wick went lower here. We technically made a little bit of a lower low. Now it's flat, but that's a lower low. You know, in my book, it's a little bit of a lower low. Who wants to make a lower low on a 4-hour scale? What that does is that opens the door to retest this area, right? Because you like to get equal lows sometimes. Sometimes they like to come back and at least test it. Or, obviously, if you start to get down here again, you know, now you're opening the door to this block. More likely even this one. And then, you know, you get into this scary, dangerous type of situation. But, more importantly than that, if this occurred here, right, if we started to get the same type of flattening, because the flattening looks okay, right? You know, you could say, hey, this is a bear flag, but it's all right. Some of this is okay. I don't like that it's dropping lower. What I like, let me just give you very quick information on this, right? I like to see these things hold. They don't like to make them so easy for us, right? But you would prefer that it came in, immediately bounced in the next candle, kind of start to hold in your box. That would be nice, right? Or even that it came down lower, right? Let's act like price action came down lower and started to hold on this support, giving me a little more faith in this support because it's a newer support, right? That would be nice. But what would be really nice is if God's eye said, hey, early buy. You get what I'm saying? Notice that hasn't occurred. No, we were in sell. So right now we're either in sell, early sell. I can tell you, hold on, let me go look at I gotta go to another page here. If you guys want to know, right here and now, I know it'll take some time, these things take forever to get posted, but I can look at God's eye and find out. Oh, okay, wrong chart. 4 hour. I have like 7 screens here, so don't worry, but Alright, I'm trying to look at where we're at. 20. Let me calculate the algorithm. So right now, technically, it was in sell, and it only improved to early sell, right? Which will never show up. This doesn't make sense, because it's not going to give you a new early sell signal when you're under a sell. Technically, anyone that's in here is in here. So at the moment, nothing's changed. It's an early sell. It hasn't even made it to neutral. So that's the reasoning for this discussion. Actually, I'm looking right in here. Let me see if something changed. No. Okay, so the idea here is that you're in a situation to where you're still under that early sell type criteria. You would want to see. Does this mean this thing can't pop off? Sure it could, right? This next bar could be super bullish. You get sort of a late signal on this 4-hour time frame, and it can go, maybe test this range again. I don't know. But what I would like is to get some confirmation above support from God's eye that says, hey, at least this candle's pretty strong. And what else can you do, by the way? So now I want to highlight this region right there, right? So let's just say, I know it hasn't happened, but let's just imagine that now you did see early buy and you got in. Well, let's lower our time frame, right, to something like a 1 hour. Keep God's eye on in these situations. Now, what are we seeing in God's eye? On the 1 hour, you're starting to see this, right? That hey, it was giving you the buy signal, and then but it's choppiness. We know that we're in chop. Remember, the 4 hour, we know that it's still in sell. So all this is being within the confines of the higher time frame. Okay. So just now you see that early sell. So we're at early sell. That means it's jumping around. It probably jumped from early sell to a neutral to early sell, etc. But my point is, let's imagine that 4 hour said buy or early buy, and we came in, but doesn't mean we feel super confident about it. So we can come in here and now watch and say, all right, what is this telling us? You know, if you come in here and you see something like a buy, you probably want to cover on that 1 hour, because you don't want to sit through this. Now, does that mean that if you cover, you might not re-enter? You might re-enter. You might go buy. This is early sell again. You get back in. Maybe you get chopped up. That's trading. You know, that's fine. But you're trying to catch one of these, right? So you're more than willing to either take a break even, a small win, small loss if you're trying to catch one of those. So the idea is you want to utilize tools that are going to help you make effective decisions. Not the way these people on Twitter use it. Right? When they post a chart and say, look at my chart. It works half the time. Great. That does nothing for me. Right? What am I going to do with something that works half the time? Now, can you have an effective strategy with something that works half the time? Absolutely. You know, that's why the Heikin Ashi system exists. We're talking about taking a time frame, shrinking it, utilizing something like Heikin Ashi to protect yourself from significant losses, letting runners run. Understand? We let the runners run. We cut the loss in that situation. Even if it only works 25% of the time, we're likely to make more than we lose. That's the idea. That's just being smart with the way that we're utilizing the system. But does that mean that I want to utilize a trigger or a pattern or anything like that that only works 50% of the time? No. If I'm trading with a software, yeah, that's fine. I can utilize the system with it. But ideally, we want to improve that. Right? And that don't necessarily mean hit rate. I'm just saying in general, you don't want to do something that the masses are doing, because what they're doing is they're losing money, right? They're not getting in front of the order flow, which we see that, hey, on a higher scale, the order flow is telling us, nope, we're going down, right? See that? Right there. So the order flow is saying, I'm dressing this up a little, I'm hiding it, but in actuality, I'm early sell, early sell. I know there's a little early buys in there. You know, those are the bulls, man. They were anxious. So let me try to explain this to you, and then I'll go ahead and end this particular video. But I'll give you a couple pieces of information also. But right here, how does this work? You may say, well, hey, this is confusing. Okay, but what are you really seeing? Early sell, early buy. Early sell, early buy, sell. What does that grouping of information tell you? Bears are now in control. Bulls are getting trapped. There's no other way to look at this. You got two little early buys mixed in with 3 sells and 2 early sells. Okay? That's the game. Chop, 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 right? And the bulls, man, they were anxious. Bears, they love it. Go ahead, yeah, push higher. We're going to go ahead and short that into you. No problem. No problem. And then the guy with the money says, see ya, and everyone panics. All these, all it takes, just so you know, means it just, the guy that has enough money, he pushes market order. Bam. Once this is down here, the retail takes care of it. They're the ones that panic and sell down the rest. They do this one too. And look how much bigger this one was than this one. So this guy comes in, he flushes 1,000 Bitcoin in a sell that he probably bought here. Then they started to short on another exchange somewhere else, and what do? They push that button, coordinated attack, sold a bunch of things at once. It's not manipulation, guys. They got the money. They can do whatever they want, just like you're allowed. It's not manipulation if you go in and make a winning or losing trade and push the button too. They just got more. So you got to get in front of that flow. That's our plan. That's what we have to do. So, yeah, what do we do now? It's the weekend. I'm not going to do much of anything. I might be watching if I see something come up and set up. But unfortunately, if something happens on the weekend, it just makes me sick. But if I start to see something in here where I start to say, all right, you know what? This is going to dump, then maybe I'll jump in on a lower time frame with the tight stop, hoping that I catch a bigger part of a move. Or if I start to see something roll over and say early buy or something along those lines, then you might take it in the other direction. I know that kind of sounds like half and half, and it is, unfortunately, right? I want to get a clearer signal from here if I can. But sometimes that's how it is. Sometimes you just say, I got to be out. And I know that's not ideal. We want to be apart because we're all afraid, hey, this thing's going to take off. But just really quick, I said I'm going to cut this thing short, but I do want to show you a little bit back in time. Why do we go back and look at some of these things that happened in history? Is it because they're going to work out the exact same way? No. But one, Bitcoin is a very new. First of all, it's unique, right? And it's also very new. It only has 10 years of history. So who are we going to compare it to? I guess we could try to compare it to gold charts and things of that nature, and there's a fair comparison there. But the idea here is that if we have a big bear market that occurred, we can try to look at it and decipher some things if possible. And one thing we could do, we put up this Bollinger Band on a weekly scale. We could see that when we had these drop-offs, whether we're at this type of stage or this type of stage, because, hey, we could go lower, right? What occurred? We had a run-up, 1-2 weeks, a run-down of 2 weeks, right? Before finally going back. You don't think at this point these people thought this thing was dumping? They make it hard. That's the only reason why I'm showing this right now. They don't make it easy. They make it difficult. So here we are, rejection. This is ugly. It's definitely ugly. Bullish engulfing. Runs up, almost kisses the mid-Bollinger Band before a mega dump. Right now, this was a triangle, so it gave you the opportunity to get out because it broke down. So, like I said, you'll start to see these type of consolidations just naturally over time. But basically, at something like this, and once it broke down out of that triangle, the reality is it gave a beautiful short signal, which is good. So I would love for it to give us something like that. And you might have noticed I have some lines drawn where it might be doing something like that. And that would be good if we can catch that. And I want something clearer like that. And if not, if I miss it, I miss it. I'm okay with that. But the idea here is that happened. So maybe we're at this stage here, right? Well, maybe we are. And if that's the case, well, we had the big dump, right? Then we had a week of growing, 2 weeks really, but in this case it lost it. Another week, so almost 2 red weeks here, kind of sideways. Look where this thing was relative to the low. The closing low was 211, and at the end of 2 weeks after the first big run, and by the way, it was a big run. It went from 153 to 311. It basically doubled. And yet, just 3 weeks later, you had a close of 223. And this close was 211. So you're talking about, look how close it got. And then, everyone had to be thinking, this thing's going to dump again. Of course it is. It's going to zero. What else would you think in this situation? This is a terrible candle, right? It's got to go to zero. And then, of course, it runs up and kisses the Bollinger right there, the weekly mid-band. Now, one thing that happened with all of these runs, though, is that it didn't make it, but it got close. It didn't make it, but it got close there, too. And then finally it made it. Let's look at present day. Tell you why I'm bringing that up. I'll tell you something that might scare you. Let's see. Is it going to get rid of my Bollinger? Let me see. Forget. No, good. All right. So here we go. what do we notice here? Now, there's a lot of similarities in that, hey, a few weeks later after we start bouncing, it hasn't made it very far, right? It was a nice bounce here, but it's given back a decent amount in that 0.618 range. I'm very sorry, I keep these things going. I try to make a quick video and it goes so long. I hope you guys don't mind. I apologize for that, but I'm trying to give you as much information as possible. And like I said, we're going to start doing some of these live, and then I'll keep them out as a recording as well, so that I can just ramble on. And you guys can kind of expect it. Where's my bar? Oh, here it is. Okay, so we started there, right there, and you know, we basically retraced the 0.618, right, the golden ratio. So ideally, we hold up here, but we're retesting it. So the reason I bring that up is, you know, you're closer to the bottom than the recent top at the moment. It's close, you know, it's in that 50-50 range, but still, the point is, it's come back a decent amount where there's some fear. But what we notice is, man, it hasn't got anywhere near that Bollinger. Nowhere near. So if we lose this thing, man, I feel like we're going to go much lower. As sad as it may seem, losing this, you have the double bottom possibilities, and those things are normal, but it just feels like if you're not going for that Bollinger, you're going to go ugly, meaning it seems unlikely that you're going to go just below it and then bounce back. I could be completely wrong, and I apologize for that. You know, that's why bottoms are so difficult, but that's my impression, that, you know, this thing needs to make a run for this thing before coming back to test it. Doesn't mean it has to touch it. You know, we've seen it twice the last time around. It just got close. But this would mean to me, like, hey, this is all part of just a big old leg, you know, that this would be like a 4-wave. Again, if you don't get into waves are only something that works well in hindsight, so don't worry about that. But in hindsight, we're going to look back and say, hey, this was a 4 and maybe a 5 if we lose it, to something much deeper, and then try to make some kind of run up. Could be a slow run up or whatever it is to this Bollinger. I don't know. Or we start it pretty soon, right? We get into something, kind of survive this week, and then make some kind of effort towards this thing. Whether we kiss it or not, come up short, just make a run to where they are in close proximity before now coming back and either making a slightly lower low, a slightly higher low, a double bottom. All of those things make a lot more sense to me if we progress a little more. Because to me, although this was a healthy run that was fun, nice to be a part of, good games, in the bigger picture, bearish move so far. Relative to this is super bearish in my opinion. You need to see something more bullish. In fact, almost climbing to this level, it was almost more of a head fake at the moment if we were to regress. So we'll want to see some progression before that regression. Now, is it going to go from here to the moon? No way. The very most likely scenario would be that if you are blessed with some type of bullish type of run, I say blessed because you can make more on the upside than the downside because there's less limits, is that you're in a situation to say, hey, we're running up, we made a fair test at that mid Bollinger on the weekly, whether we got there or not, let's start back building, right, and hopefully get some type of nice formation, a correction of sorts. Now the bears can pile in and say, no, we're going to zero, but the bulls will have some ammunition in that situation. There will be ceilings. You'll have a lot of resistance. It will be a slow grind in that situation, but there will be a way to see a path. And it will be tradable. It will be tradable on the downside and tradable on the upside. Right now, the people that know what they're doing, oh, they're lying to you. Now, we have to be aware, did this just occur, that triangle? There's a couple ways to look at it. I'm going to clear everything now. Let me delete it all because I want to show you this. Did this just happen? Well, if it did, man, it was an ugly head fake that went that way and then that way. Or are we in something larger? Let's change the scale now. A lot of these patterns, you know, you don't see them until after the fact, and it's like, oh yeah, of course, that's what happened. Now the bottom one's going to be a little bit difficult, but on the top, we could say something like that to say, hey, is this some kind of, again, triangle? At the moment, we can only connect it to where we're at. We just don't know. But it's very possible that we had some kind of triangle like this. That we lost. Could have been like this, and you came got the head fake, a couple head fakes, and then the ugly bleed out. Take it like this. I like to keep these in perspective, the moves to each other. So I don't like to drag those over here, but it could have been something like that and you just lost it. If so, we're going to be looking at something a lot lower, right? But we got to let these things develop. We'll know because there's resistance here, and this resistance will continue to hold if we do see some upside. And there's a possibility that if we see some sort of sideways in a rally, you could say, all right, let's connect this. We have a bigger triangle. Hopefully gets resolved sometime next week to give us some clearer direction of what's going on. That would be an ideal situation because it would be a little bit clearer. At the time, we can do something like this. I hope when you hear these things, you think, well, this guy's giving me 100 suggestions. Yeah, we're just trying to formulate some ideas, that's all. That's kind of how this thing works. You say, all right, well, regardless of what we know and don't know, we can say that at the moment we know that there's a top side, and we know that there's a flattening on the bottom here of this range. If this breaks, it's bearish. If this were to break, we would consider that bullish. So that's what we're working with right now. All right, very long, lots more coming. We're going to start really expediting some of this process where I'm going to give you a bunch of videos, and then what we'll do is we'll spend a lot of time evaluating those videos. You understand? I'm going to give you a bunch of videos, right? And then we're going to spend a lot of time going deeper into them. So be prepared for that. I wanted to let everyone unwind out of the break. I want everyone to digest the MACD video. We're going to have several more MACD videos. There's a few different subjects I'm going to touch on as well. And it's very important that I don't lose you guys during that time. That's why we're going to have some group discussions about it as well. So things are exciting. We're going to start getting a lot deeper into things. Take your time, learn the material that you do have, learn it well, learn it ad nauseum, meaning that till you're sick in your stomach, till you know it like the back of your hand. Talk to you soon. This is Mr. Anderson. I'm out. Have a great day.